I begin, let me tell you something. Some stories are just stories, but some, they're memories someone carries because they can't forget them. This is one of those stories. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about a Thanksgiving dinner that should have been warm, loving, and ordinary, but instead became something twisted, something unforgettable, something horrifying. So, sit back, relax, and listen carefully, because this is the story of the Thanksgiving guest who never left. My name is Evan, and this happened when I was 17. Thanksgiving was always simple at our house. My mom cooked, my dad complained about the traffic, and my sister snuck bites while pretending to taste test. But that year, my mom decided to do something she never did. She invited a stranger. She said she met him at the grocery store the week before, an older man in a brown coat, with a warm voice and a gentle smile. He told her he had no family, and my mom, she had a soft heart. She said everyone deserves a place on Thanksgiving. When she told us his name, I felt a strange chill. His name is Harper. He'll be joining us. I didn't know why the name bothered me. Maybe it was the way she said it, like she was reading from a script. But I shrugged it off. One extra plate. One lonely old man. What harm could that bring? Thanksgiving night, at exactly 7 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Not a normal knock. 3 slow taps, a pause died to more. I opened the door, and there he was. A tall man, thinner than I expected. Long gray hair tucked under a worn hat. His eyes were strangely bright, almost too bright. But the thing I noticed most, he didn't look cold. It was freezing outside, yet his cheeks weren't flushed and there was no steam from his breath. Just stood there, smiling that gentle smile my mom had described. "You must be Evan," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Your mother has told me so much about you." He stepped inside, bringing a strange stillness with him. The usual Thanksgiving chaos, the sounds of my sister laughing and the TV droning on, seemed to quiet down the moment he crossed the threshold. Dinner was awkward. My dad tried to make small talk about football, but Harper would only smile and nod, his bright eyes fixed on my mom. He barely touched his food, instead spending his time telling stories. They were strange stories, about places I'd never heard of in times that didn't seem to fit into any history book I'd ever read. He spoke of cities made of glass and forests where the trees sang. My sister was captivated, but I just felt uneasy. Every time he finished a tale, he'd look at my mom and say, "Isn't that right, dear?" And my mom, who was usually so talkative, would just nod, her own smile looking a little stiff, a little forced. She was acting like she'd known him her whole life. The way she refilled his glass without him asking. The way she laughed at his jokes before he even got to the punchline. It was all wrong. For dinner, my dad put on a movie, a dumb comedy we watched every year. We all settled onto the couch, but the mood was different. Harper sat in my dad's favorite armchair, and my dad didn't say a word. Just sat on the floor, leaning against the sofa. It was like Harper had taken his place, and no one dared to question it. Halfway through the movie, I noticed something. Harper wasn't watching the screen. His gaze was drifting around the room, slowly, deliberately. He looked at the family photos on the mantelpiece, at the crayon drawing my sister made in first grade that was still on the fridge, at the worn spot on the rug where our old dog used to sleep. His smile faded, replaced by an expression of deep, unsettling concentration. It was like he was memorizing our lives, cataloging every detail of our home. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This man wasn't just a guest. He was an observer, an inspector. Later that night, as everyone started to get sleepy, my dad finally spoke up. "Well, Harper, it was a pleasure having you, but it's getting late." Harper turned his gaze from the mantelpiece to my dad. His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't think I'll be leaving just yet," he said softly. "It's so comfortable here." My dad opened his mouth to protest, but my mom cut him off. "Of course, you can stay. You can have the guest room." Her voice was cheerful, but her eyes darted nervously towards me. It was a look I'd never seen before, a silent plea. but a plea for what? Help? Or for me to stay quiet? I didn't know what to do. My dad just sank back down, looking defeated. The night ended with Harper walking upstairs, my mom showing him to the guest room as if he were a long-lost relative. The rest of us just sat there in silence, the leftover turkey growing cold on the counter. The warmth of Thanksgiving had vanished completely, replaced by a chilling sense of dread. The next morning, I expected to find Harper gone. He was just an eccentric old man who had overstayed his welcome. But he wasn't gone. He was sitting at our kitchen table, sipping coffee, reading my dad's newspaper. He was wearing my dad's bathrobe. "Good morning, Evan," he said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Your mother makes excellent coffee." My dad walked in, saw Harper, and just stopped. He looked at the bathrobe, at the newspaper, at the man sitting in his chair. He didn't say a thing. Just turned around, went to the living room, and turned on the television. My sister came down, saw Harper, and just said, "Good morning, Uncle Harper." "Uncle? Since when was he your uncle?" I looked at my mom, who was at the stove making eggs. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just kept cooking, her movements robotic. It was like my family had accepted this overnight, like a switch had been flipped, and I was the only one who remembered that just yesterday this man was a complete stranger. Days turned into a week. Harper never left. He integrated himself into our family with an eerie seamlessness. He started answering our home phone. He'd give my dad advice on his work. He'd help my sister with her homework, somehow knowing the answers to complex math problems without even looking at the book. And everyone just went along with it. They started calling him Uncle Harper. They started rearranging their lives around him. My dad moved his things out of the master bedroom and into the guest room, giving his and my mom's room to Harper. No explanation was given. It just happened. I tried to talk to them. I cornered my mom in the laundry room one afternoon. "Mom, who is he? Why is he still here?" She just looked at me, her eyes wide with a fear I couldn't comprehend. "Hush, Evan. Don't cause trouble. Harper is family now." She patted my cheek, her hand trembling slightly, and then she walked away. The weirdest part was how our house began to change. Little things at first. The family photos on the mantelpiece started to get replaced. One by one, our faces disappeared, and in their place were old, faded pictures of strangers I'd never seen. A woman with Harper's bright eyes, a young boy in old-fashioned clothing. When I asked my sister who they were, she just looked at me, confused. "What are you talking about, Evan?" "That's Great-Aunt Clara, and that's our cousin William." She said it with such conviction that for a second I almost believed her. Felt like I was losing my mind. Was I the one who was wrong? These my memories failing me. I started looking through old photo albums, desperate to prove I wasn't crazy. But the albums were changing too. Pictures of me on my 5th birthday now had a strange man with gray hair standing in the background, smiling. Reality I knew was being overwritten, edited, and I was the only one who could see the original draft. One night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but it was a heavy, suffocating quiet. I crept downstairs for a glass of water and saw a light on in the living room. It was Harper. He was standing in front of the mantelpiece, holding the last picture of our original family, me, my mom, my dad, and my sister at the beach last summer. He was just staring at it, his expression unreadable. Then, very slowly, he took the photo out of its frame. He didn't rip it or throw it away. He held it over the flame of a candle he'd lit on the coffee table, watched hidden in the shadows of the hallway as our smiling faces curled, blackened, and turned to ash. He then took a new photo from his pocket, one of him standing alone on a desolate-looking street, and slid it into the now empty frame. He placed it back on the mantelpiece, right in the center. He had erased us. My throat felt tight. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my ears. He didn't just want to stay. He wanted to replace us. I knew I had to get out. I couldn't save them. They were already gone, their minds reshaped by whatever strange power this man held. I packed a bag in the dead of and a spare set of keys. Before I left, I took one last look at my family. My dad was asleep on the guest room floor. My sister was in her bed, a small smile on her face. And my mom, she was asleep on the couch in the living room. She had given up her own bed. As I stood by the front door, my hand on the knob, I heard his voice from the top of the stairs. "Leaving so soon, Evan?" I didn't turn around. I couldn't. "It's a shame," he continued, his voice calm and even. "They'll barely even remember you by morning. A faint memory, like a dream you can't quite hold on to. But don't worry, I'll take good care of them. This is a nice house, a nice family. I think I'll be very happy here." I didn't wait to hear more. I pulled the door open and ran. I ran without looking back, the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the silent, cold street. I never went back. I don't know what happened to the people who were once my family. Sometimes, late at night, I'll search online for my old address. The house is still there. Property records say it's owned by a man named Harper and his family. There are no records of my parents or my sister ever having lived there. It's as if they were ghosts and he was the one who was always real. I'm telling you this story not just as a spooky tale for a dark night. I'm telling you because some doors should never be opened. Some invitations should never be made. And some guests are not looking for a place to stay for the night. They're looking for a place to stay forever. They're looking for a life to call their own. Be careful who you let in. You never know who or what might be looking to replace you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found yourself holding your breath, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there. Harper's expression didn't change at all. He just whispered, "Yes, exactly like that." At that exact moment, the lights in the dining room flickered, just once, but it was enough. The room suddenly felt colder, so much colder, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature crawled up my spine. After dinner, my mom, in her usual cheerful way, insisted we take a family photo with him. She said it would be a good memory. I remember thinking how wrong that felt. But you don't argue with Mom about family photos. So we all lined up in the hallway. Mom, Dad, my sister Emily, and me. And Harper. He stood right in the middle between my parents, a strange, still figure in our family lineup. My dad held up his digital camera. "Okay, everyone, say cheese." The flash was blindingly bright. For a split second, everything was white. Then the image appeared on the camera's small screen. We all leaned in to look, and that's when we all gasped. Or at least, I thought we all did. The photo was sharp. You could see the pattern on the wallpaper, the reflection in my dad's glasses, the little stray hair on Emily's forehead. But Harper, his face was a blur. It wasn't motion blur, because he had been standing perfectly still. It wasn't an out-of-focus blur, because the rest of him was clear. It looked like his face was missing, just a smudged, indistinct shape where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. He leaned in, peering at the tiny screen, and a soft, almost mournful whisper escaped his lips. "Oh," he said, "sometimes these devices don't capture me well." That was it. That was the moment the unease I'd been feeling all evening curdled into pure, undiluted fear. Real fear. Because no one else reacted. Not my mom. Not my dad. Not my sister. They just stared at the picture, their faces blanked out distant, almost trance-like. My own heart was hammering against my ribs. I turned to my mom, my voice barely a squeak. "Mom, are you okay?" She turned her head towards me slowly, way too slowly. Her movements were stiff, unnatural, like a puppet on a string. And when she spoke, her voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. "I'm just tired, honey." But her voice, it wasn't hers. It sounded stretched, thin, like an old recording playing at the wrong speed. It was my mom's voice, but it was empty. My family dispersed, moving like sleepwalkers. Mom went to the kitchen to do the dishes, her movements robotic. Dad just stood there staring at the camera in his hands. Emily drifted back to her room without a word. I was left alone in the hallway. The chilling image of the faceless man burned into my mind. I followed Harper into the living room. I don't know why. It was a stupid, dangerous thing to do. But I couldn't stop myself. It was a mix of morbid curiosity, raw fear, and some primal instinct telling me I had to know. He didn't turn on the lights. Just walked over to my dad's big leather recliner, the one Dad always sat in to watch TV, and he sat down in it. He sank into the cushions like he owned the chair, like he'd been sitting there every night for 20 years. He just sat there in the gloom, a silhouette against the window. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, and then, without even turning to look at me, he spoke. His voice was calm, conversational, which only made it 1,000 times more terrifying. "You know who I am, don't you, Evan?" My throat felt like it was full of sand. I swallowed, the sound loud in the quiet room. My voice came out as a choked whisper. "I don't," he chuckled. It wasn't a happy sound. It was dry, like leaves skittering across pavement. "Oh, I think you do. Deep down, you're the only one who still sees. The only one who remembers what this family is supposed to look like." He finally turned his head, and in the dim light from the street lamp outside, I could almost make out his features. Almost, they seemed to shift, to swirl like smoke. "They've forgotten," he continued, his voice dropping even lower. "It's so easy for them to forget. They just need a little nudge, a replacement, someone to fill the space." He gestured vaguely around the room at the family photos on the mantel. "They don't even notice when things change. When someone is erased." My blood ran cold. Erased. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. I backed away slowly, my hand fumbling behind me for the wall. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask. "Who are you?" He stood up from the recliner, and he seemed to grow taller in the shadows. "I'm not a who," he said, his voice now a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "I'm a what? I am what happens when you're forgotten, when the memory of you fades just enough. I'm the space that's left behind. And spaces need to be filled." He took a step towards me. "Your family needed someone to complete their picture. They've been missing someone for a very, very long time. They just couldn't remember who. So they found me. Or perhaps I found them. I thought about the family photos. I tried to picture them in my head, the ones from my childhood. And a horrifying, impossible realization began to dawn on me. There was always a space, on the end of the line, an empty spot on the couch, a gap in the group hugs, a space I'd never consciously noticed before, but now it was screamingly obvious. A space that was just the right size for a person. "Don't worry, Evan," Harper said, and he was closer now. So close I could feel the cold radiating from him. "It doesn't hurt. Not for them, anyway. Forgetting is a gentle thing, like falling asleep. Soon, you'll forget too. You'll look at the photo from tonight, and you won't see a blur. You'll see me. You'll see your family, whole and happy. You won't remember there was ever a time I wasn't here." His hand reached out towards my face, his fingers long and pale in the darkness. "It's your turn to be tired now, honey," he whispered, and the voice that came out of his mouth was my mother's, perfectly. Even though the air outside was freezing, he looked comfortable, like the cold welcomed him. "Good evening," he said softly. His voice was calm, almost soothing. "Thank you for having me." I stepped aside to let him in. He walked in slowly, deliberately, almost like he was savoring each step. That's when my dog, Cooper, started barking like crazy. Now, you have to understand, Cooper never barked at people. He was the friendliest golden retriever you'd ever meet. But with this man, Harper, he backed away, whining, shaking. Harper just smiled and said animals always sense interesting things. I didn't know what he meant by that, not then, but I would soon find out. Dinner began like any normal Thanksgiving. My mom, a stickler for tradition, insisted we all start with a prayer. But when she asked us to join hands, Harper hesitated. It wasn't long, just a fraction of a second, but it was long enough for me to notice. He eventually reached out, his hand finding mine. His skin was ice cold. Not just it's a cold day cold. This was a deep, penetrating cold. Kind that feels like it's radiating from inside the bones. When the prayer ended and we all said amen, he didn't. He just whispered, lovely. And the night just kept getting stranger from there. He didn't touch the turkey, or the stuffing, or the mashed potatoes. He didn't eat anything warm, but he devoured the cranberries. Spoon after spoon, he ate them like he hadn't had a meal in years. My sister leaned toward me, whispering, what kind of person only eats cold food? I didn't answer her. I couldn't, because I was watching Harper's eyes. They weren't bright and welcoming anymore. They were hungry, dark. Halfway through dinner, my mom, trying to be a good host, asked him politely, so, Harper, tell us about your family. That was the moment the entire room shifted. The cheerful holiday atmosphere vanished. He slowly put down his spoon, folded his hands on the table, and smiled. It was a slow, unnerving smile that didn't reach his eyes. My family is very old, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Older than this town, older than this country. We had rituals, traditions, especially on the harvest holidays. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. The room felt heavy, suffocating. Our Thanksgiving wasn't about giving thanks. He leaned closer, his dark eyes locking onto mine. It was about inviting someone in. My dad chuckled awkwardly, trying to break the tension. You mean like we invited you? Harper's smile widened. Precisely. He picked up his fork and began tracing patterns on the tablecloth. In the old days, when the nights grew long and the world grew cold, families would leave a place set at their table, an offering, an invitation for a spirit of the harvest to join them. He looked around our table at the turkey, the gravy, the warm side dishes. They believed that if you welcomed the spirit, honored it with a place at your feast, it would grant you a bountiful year, protection from the long winter. My sister scoffed. So you're saying you're a harvest ghost? Harper let out a low, soft laugh. Ghost, no. Nothing so simple. A ghost is a memory. I am a presence. He continued, his voice hypnotic. The invitation is a binding contract. Once extended, once accepted, it must be honored. The host family provides a warm home, a seat at the table, and sustenance. He looked back at the untouched turkey, and the visitor provides their blessing for the coming year. But there are rules. The visitor cannot partake of the warm, living food. Their nature is of the cold of the end of the season. They can only consume that which is cold, preserved, like the harvest cranberries. He gestured with his fork toward the now empty bowl of cranberry sauce. A chill colder than the one from his hand crept up my spine. My dad, ever the pragmatist, finally spoke up. This is a very elaborate story, Murdoch Harper. Are you a writer? A historian? Harper's eyes flickered to my father. I am a collector, he stated simply. I collect invitations. He then turned his gaze to my mother. Tell me, he asked, his voice gentle again, when you prepared this feast, did you find yourself making more than you usually do? Setting an extra plate without thinking? My mom's face went pale. She looked at the empty seat next to my aunt, a seat we hadn't planned for. She just put it there on a whim, thinking maybe a neighbor would drop by. She nodded slowly, her hand going to her mouth. That is the call, Harper whispered. The unconscious pull of the old traditions. You felt the coming cold, the need for protection, and you sent out an invitation without even knowing it. And I answered. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to have stopped. We were all frozen, trapped in his story, in his presence. My dog, Cooper, was still hiding under the table, whimpering softly. Harper looked down, a flicker of something like pity in his eyes. He knows. The animals always know when the natural order is bent. He then folded his napkin and placed it beside his plate. The meal is over. The contract is fulfilled for this night. I have been welcomed. I have partaken. He stood up, his tall frame casting a long, dark shadow in the dim dining room light. And now, the blessing. He walked slowly around the table, placing a cold hand on each of our shoulders. When his hand touched me, the cold was so intense it felt like a burn. It was a cold that didn't just touch my skin, it sank into my soul. It felt ancient, hungry, and eternal. You will have a prosperous year, he declared, his voice echoing in the silent house. Your harvest will be plentiful and the winter will not harm you. You are under my protection now. He walked to the front door just as slowly as he had entered. He didn't look back. He opened the door and a blast of frigid air swirled into the room, extinguishing a few of the candles on the table. I will see you again, he said, not to any one of us, but to the house itself. The invitation, once accepted, is standing. And then he was gone. He stepped out into the freezing night and vanished as if he were made of shadow and frost. We stood there, paralyzed for what felt like an eternity. Finally, my dad rushed to the door, looking out into the empty street. There were no footprints in the light dusting of snow on the porch. It was as if he had never been there at all. We spent the rest of the night in a state of quiet shock. No one wanted to admit what we had all just experienced. But we knew we had invited something ancient into our home. The next morning, we found a single, perfect, blood-red cranberry sitting on the empty plate where he had sat. And that year, it was the best we ever had. My dad's business boomed. My sister got a scholarship to her dream school. I recovered from an illness doctors had been baffled by. The winter was one of the harshest on record, but our house never lost power, our pipes never froze. We were safe. We were blessed. But every autumn since, as the air gets crisp and the leaves start to turn, a sense of dread settles over our house. We don't talk about it, but we all feel it. The approach of Thanksgiving, because we know that the invitation is still standing. We know that on that Thursday in November, there will be an extra place at our table. We know that as the sun goes down, we will hear a soft knock on our door, and he will be there smiling that cold smile, ready to join us for dinner. Because some traditions, once you invite them in, never ever leave. Thanks for watching, and if you have a spooky story of your own, share it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange tales. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel tonight. I have a story for you that might just make you think twice. But who you invite over for the holidays? It is a chilling tale that starts with a simple act of kindness and spirals into a never-ending nightmare. So turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. It was Thanksgiving night, and the house was filled with the warm, comforting smells of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie. My family was asleep, full and happy after the feast, but I couldn't sleep. Something felt off. I wandered downstairs and found a stranger sitting at our dining table. A man I'd never seen before. He was young, with kind eyes, but there was an ancient coldness about him that made the hair on my arm stand up. Who are you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How did you get in here? He smiled softly, a gentle, unnerving curve of his lips. Yes, you do know me, in a way. Your family invited me, and once I'm invited, I never leave. A chill that had nothing to do with the late November air crept down my spine. I took a step back, my hand reaching for the wall to steady myself. What are you? He tilted his head, his gaze analytical, almost curious. We used to be called many things, spirits, old gods, harvest watchers. We are the guests who arrive when the first real cold of winter bites, to see which family will be generous enough to welcome us in. My heart hammered against my ribs. And what do you do when someone welcomes you? I whispered, afraid of the answer. His smile widened, showing a hint of teeth that seemed just a little too sharp. I stay. Panic seized me. I spun around and ran up the stairs, my feet pounding on the wooden steps. I had to wake them. I had to get them out. I burst into my parents' room, shaking my father's shoulder. Dad, wake up. There's someone in the house. No reaction. His eyes were open, staring blankly at the ceiling. His breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. It was the same with my mother, my sister, my brother, all of them with their eyes wide open, staring into nothingness. It was as though they were puppets and some unseen force was holding their strings, keeping them perfectly still. A soft voice whispered from the doorway behind me, "Don't worry, They'll wake up eventually. Once I'm done settling in, I whipped around to see him standing there, leaning against the door frame, as if he owned the place. His name was Harper. My mother had called him that when she de-invited him in from the cold earlier that evening. "What do you mean, settling in?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. He pushed off the door frame and stepped closer, then closer still, invading my personal space until I could feel the strange, unnatural cold radiating from him. He leaned in, his voice a conspiratorial whisper right next to my ear. "Thanksgiving is the one night of the year when a home must accept a guest, no questions asked. It's an ancient rule, and your sweet mother, bless her heart, she invited me. That's when I broke. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just ran. I shoved past him, bolted down the stairs, and burst out the front door into the freezing night air. The icy wind was a slap in the face, but it was better than the suffocating stillness of my own home. He didn't chase me. He didn't need to. The damage was done. I never went back to that house. I couldn't. I called the police from a payphone miles away, babbling about a man and my family not waking up. They investigated, of course. They found nothing. The official report said my family had simply disappeared. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no evidence of any crime at all. The house was just as we had left it. The table was still set with the remnants of our Thanksgiving dinner, the food now cold and congealed on the plates. But there was one difference. Beside one empty plate where the stranger had been sitting was a single, neatly folded note. On it were 5 simple words. "Thank you for having me. That was years ago. Every Thanksgiving since, I've been on the move. I changed cities, rent different apartments, stay in cheap, anonymous motels. I never stay in one place for long, but it doesn't matter. Every year, on the last Thursday of November at exactly 7 o'clock in the evening, I hear it. A knock at the door, 3 slow, deliberate taps, a short pause, then to more doubt it's him. I know it is. I never open the door. I just sit there in the dark, holding my breath until my lungs burn, praying he'll go away. He always does, eventually. But I know that one day he'll get tired of knocking. One day, I think he'll just let himself in, because all my family already invited him. And once invited, he never ever leaves. Thank you for listening and for surviving another night with me. If your eyes are still open, don't worry. The darkness will take care of that soon enough. I'll be waiting for you again next time, right here. The whispers you hear in the dark turn into your worst nightmares. Until then, sleep well. If you happen to hear something moving in the shadows tonight, just remember, it's probably listening to you too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you want to be here for the next story. Good night.